Thank you for joining me today for the Operatory and Schedules Setup webinar for clinics users. In this webinar, we will cover how to set up operatories for clinics, the benefits of setting up operatories and schedules, how to set up schedules, and what happens to provider assignments when creating an appointment with and without schedules. The treating provider assigned to the appointment is prioritized in the following order. Open Dental will start by looking at the procedure code level assignments. This can be found under Lists, Procedure Codes, and inside of a specific procedure. If we double-click to open up the Edit Procedure Code window, you'll notice there's a box for Assign to Provider. Open Dental will check to see if you've chosen an override provider as a default provider for this specific procedure. This is helpful if you have a provider who only does specific procedures at your clinic, regardless of who is doing the appointment or who is doing other procedures on that appointment. Setting this procedure complete would default to Dr. J for the production. Next, Open Dental will look at the provider that was manually selected on an appointment. You can manually select a provider on the appointment when you first create that appointment or after they've been created by double-clicking into the appointment and changing the provider listed here. Changing the provider manually will override the provider who was originally on that appointment. You'll notice that the color changed on my appointment to show that this is now being done by a different provider. Next, Open Dental will look at the provider with a schedule out of that operatory. A schedule is indicated by a white background listed over the top of the gray area here. We do not currently have a schedule set up in this window, so it shows the gray background instead. Next, Open Dental will look at the default provider for the operatory if no schedule exists. Then if there is no schedule or default operatory provider, the appointment will default to the patient's primary provider. Let's go over how to set up an operatory in Open Dental. This can be found under Setup, Appointments, and Operatories. You'll notice in my Operatories window right away that this is showing the clinics all. I can differentiate which clinics right away by selecting which clinic I want to create an operatory for, and you'll notice that I don't have any operatory set up for that specific clinic. Open Dental will come default with several operatories already listed and ready to be edited. If you need to add additional operatories into your system, clicking on the Add button in the top right-hand corner will allow you to add additional operatory lines. You can also combine the operatories by highlighting more than one column, clicking your Combine button, and Open Dental will warn you that this is combining all selected operatories into one operatory. You will still need to choose which operatory you want to keep in your system and click OK. This will hide the other operatory listed here with our As Hidden box. You can also move operatories around by highlighting one of the operatory line items and using your up and down arrows. Keep in mind that the very topmost operatory line is going to show on the far left of your appointment window as long as that operatory is within that clinic's view. Let's cover how to edit some of these operatories. We're going to start by double-clicking into the first operatory line here and giving it a descriptive name. In this case, this is Dr. Alexa's operatory, specifically for prospective patients, meaning that we're not quite sure if they're going to become an active patient in our system. This is very helpful for patients that you may not expect to come back or patients that you're scheduling for a consult appointment only. You can decide whether or not you want to change the abbreviation to something more descriptive for that particular provider's name or leaving it as Operatory 1. Is Hidden is going to mark that operatory as is hidden and will not be an option to add into an appointment view. We're going to assign Dr. Lex to Clinic Open Dental Clinic, and we're going to assign him as the provider out of this operatory. This is not a hygiene operatory though, so we're going to leave the hygienist area as none and the Is Hygiene box unchecked. This is, however, a prospective operatory. What this means is if we check the box here, Open Dental will automatically change the status of patients in this operatory to prospective. Similarly, moving the appointment out of this operatory into an operatory not marked as prospective would automatically update the patient status to being an active patient. The next section here for Web Sched settings we are not going to be covering today. This area is going to be covered in our Web Sched webinar. Please see the link below this video for additional information on setting this up. The very last option within this window is the Update Providers on Future Appointments, Update All for this operatory. This can be very helpful if you have a provider that leaves the practice and a new provider will be taking over all the appointments from that operatory. It can also be used after a conversion if you need to quickly change the operatories to the correct providers. Do not use this if the same provider is not always out of the same operatory. An example is different hygienists that share an operatory, or different providers who are fluctuating in and out of different operatories. Now we're going to edit our Operatory 2 to show that it's Dr. Lex's regular operatory. Once again, assigning this to Open Dental Clinic and assigning it to Dr. Lex as the provider, this time leaving our set perspective unchecked. Operatory 3 is for our other provider at this clinic, Dr. Abbott. ODC for the clinic and provider of Dr. Abbott. Once again, leaving the hygienist unselected and is hygiene unchecked. And Dr. Abbott doesn't want a prospective operatory, so we're going to also leave that unchecked. Next, we're going to add in our hygienists that are working out of our Open Dental Clinic. Double-clicking into the operatory line, we're going to go ahead and add in Julia's name, the fact that she's working out of the Open Dental Clinic, and for her production, for things like exams, we're going to show that Dr. Lex is typically the one who checks her exams, so he should be getting the production for those. As far as hygienist, we're going to list Julia out of her operatory and mark it as is hygiene. This makes it so this operatory, the hygienist will be considered the main provider for this op. It also means that on those procedure codes, in the edit procedure code window we were in before, if those procedures, such as prophies or perios, are marked as is hygiene within that window, the production for those procedures would go to Julia. You may want to check your system for things like bite wings and panos and FMX to make sure that there is hygiene if you want the production to go to the hygienist for those procedure codes. Otherwise, Open Dental will default any procedures not marked as is hygiene to production for the main provider out of the operatory. We're going to set up Operatory 5 for Miriam. Once again, Open Dental Clinic, but Miriam doesn't have a specific provider who checks her work for the exams, so we're going to leave this as none so that we can choose it based on the specific appointment and which provider is available at the time. Assigning her as the provider and is hygiene checked. Now that we have our Open Dental Clinic set up, you'll notice that if I change the drop-down for our clinics to ODC, our ODC operatories are the ones that are going to show. Let's go ahead and set up our last operatories here for our Clinic 1. This is for Dr. J, and once again changing it to Clinic 1, and for him as the provider. The hygienist listed out of that clinic is Drew. Dr. J is the primary provider on exams, and Drew is going to be the provider. Checking that is hygiene box. You'll notice now that I have a couple of operatories set up for Clinic 1, that if I change this to Clinic 1, it's only going to show those operatories. This is important when you're setting up appointment views, as the only operatories that are going to be available when setting up appointment views are the operatories that are for that specific clinic. You can always treat things setting up with clinics as if you're at that physical location and seeing which operatories you'd need to have set up at that physical location. Any operatories that are listed under the clinic all, so if they're not assigned to a specific clinic, you would leave that clinic as none. You can set them up to a provider and hygienist, but keep in mind that this operatory would not be able to be selected for an appointment view for either one of these clinics. This is a headquarters clinic. Now that we have our operatory set up, let's go over the schedules as well. Some of the benefits of setting up schedules in Open Dental include automating the provider assignment process, helping to eliminate errors in assigning the production to the correct provider, quick and simple recall scheduling using the Make Recall button at the top of Open Dental. If you don't have schedules set up, the Make Recall buttons won't function properly. We'll go over some examples at the end of this training. Another benefit is quickly being able to search for available time slots using our advanced search feature. Copying an appointment over to our pinboard and clicking on the advanced button will allow you to search by provider schedules, specific providers, blockouts, a specific clinic, and even specific appointment views. You can also search by all available providers with the quick search providers or hygienist buttons. If you are using or want to start using any of the Web Sched eServices, schedules are required to be set up. Let's go over how to set up a schedule. This can be found under Setup and down to Schedules. Now that we're inside of the Schedules window, you'll notice it looks a little bit different if you have clinics turned on, such as showing practice holiday notes. If I deselect the Show Clinic Holiday Notes, you'll notice that my headquarters are the only holidays that are showing in the list. These are going to be blanket holidays over all of your clinics to show that no matter which clinic you're in, that particular schedule is going to be closed. The difference between that and our Show Clinic Holiday Notes is your Show Clinic Holiday Notes is going to show holidays specific to that clinic. In this case, our ODC clinic is closed on New Year's Eve, where our Clinic 1 is closed on New Year's Day. These show the holidays and the specific clinic that that note or holiday pertains to. Next, you can look at the specific clinics by narrowing this down to their views. You'll notice that the C1 holiday disappeared from here, and switching it over to C1 makes it so our ODC holiday disappears from here. The limit to ops in clinic is helpful when you're finished with a schedule and you want to be able to limit the view to the specific option that you've chosen from here. Let's go ahead and go over how to create a schedule. We'll start this by going over how to create a schedule for Saturdays and Sundays as well as other days. To be able to see an open week that includes Saturday and Sunday, check the box for Show Weekends. This is going to show you your entire week from within this view. To create a schedule for the clinic, go ahead and double-click into the first day that you want to create a schedule for. We're going to start with our October 7th date. Double-click to open up that schedule. We're going to go ahead and choose the specific clinic that we're creating the schedule for at this time. Selecting our clinic, our ODC, and we're now going to schedule our providers, Dr. Lex, and then add to create the schedule for Dr. Lex. Now, Dr. Lex takes a specific lunch from noon to 1 every day. If you are going to be using the daily production hourly goals inside of lists and then providers and giving them an hourly goal, make sure that you're setting up the schedule to show any breaks in time that they're not actually going to be working. This will make it so their hourly production goals are not inflated. We're going to add in that he comes back from lunch at 1, and once again out of his operatories. Next, we're going to set up a schedule for Dr. Abbott, choosing him as the provider and adding in a schedule for him as well. Make sure to do the same thing for each provider so that they don't have that inflated production goal. We're going to then choose Miriam and choosing her operatory to show where we're creating the schedule for. And lastly, Julia. Now that we have the entire clinic schedule created, also showing the lunch breaks of when to keep the schedule indicated as closed, we're going to move on to our clinic C1. If you're jumping between clinics, it can be helpful to click OK to save the schedule you just created, change your clinic location so that you're only looking at the one location and going back into that day's schedule. Regardless, when I said earlier, you can narrow it down to the specific clinic that you created the schedule for, just to make sure that you've done it correctly while you're learning. Selecting the clinic ODC and limiting to ops in clinic is going to show you any schedule you've created for that specific clinic. Now let's go ahead and go over our C1. We're going to choose C1, uncheck the limit to ops in clinics, as you'll notice that having that limit to ops in clinics is going to gray out any edits that we can make to the schedule. And if I tried to double click into the schedule, OpenDental is going to tell me it can't be edited in clinic view mode. Uncheck the box and double click back in. Now we're going to enter in our clinic for C1. You'll notice that your schedules are still listed there for our OpenDental clinic. The reason for that is our OD clinic is assigned ops 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So keep in mind that even though you're seeing C1 up at the top, the operatories and the way that you set them up to make it so they're only available at one clinic is really the thing that you're looking for here. We're going to set up to C1 clinics, Dr. J, and add in a schedule for him. And also one for Drew. Once again, the importance is these operatories that are available to only specific clinics that we're scheduling out of. Make sure that your operatories are selected, especially when you're looking at clinics. Now if I narrow down just our C1 schedule and limit to ops in the clinic, you'll notice that I have those specific schedules showing for C1 and not our other providers. This is why the limit to ops in clinic is helpful to do a final check when you're done creating the schedule. Let's go ahead and create the schedule out for the next few days for these providers. If you want to create a schedule for specific providers and be able to copy and paste them to other days, it can be helpful to just look at the providers that you're trying to schedule for. If you need to jump over other providers that you don't want to be able to schedule at that time, selecting them from the provider list, holding down Control on your keyboard to jump over providers that you don't want selected, and then refresh the list. This will make it so I now am only looking at the schedules for those specific providers. And if I decide to choose the Copy Day button as an example and copy up our schedule for Wednesday onto our Thursday date, I'm only looking at these provider schedules and I'm only copying those contents to the clipboard. Let's go ahead and paste out just one for now. This replaced the schedule, if there was one, for any provider on Thursday that we have listed here. If you want to be able to paste out multiple times, such as an entire week, you can also select one specific day and then tell the system how many days out consecutively you want to repeat. We're going to create the schedule for the next 5 days by putting a number 5 in the box down here below, choosing the Monday of the following week, and clicking on the repeat button. OpenDental will let you know that it's going to replace the schedule for these 4 providers if a schedule had already existed. We're going to say yes because we know there's no schedule for those providers yet. You'll notice that it repeated out to the next 5 consecutive days. That's the big difference between paste, where it will paste it for 1 day, versus repeat, where it will repeat the number of times you have listed in the box. Now let's go into our C1 view. We're just going to look at Dr. J and Drew. Once again, make sure that you're refreshing the list when you do this. We don't currently have a schedule listed here for Dr. J and DL. So let's go ahead and go back, and we're going to copy our Wednesday, and we're going to go ahead and paste that out. Now this clinic is open different days of the week, so we're only going to open up the schedule for a couple of days. We're going to open up Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So in this case, we're going to highlight Thursday since we've already copied Wednesday, and then paste. This is only pasting it to the 1 day that I've selected, as opposed to repeat, which would have repeated it out 5 times. Now that we have schedules set up for an entire week at a time for our providers, you can make any minor edits to those schedules by simply double-clicking into the day, double-clicking into the line item, and making edits. Let's go ahead and remove the 1 to 5 p.m. for Drew by highlighting that line item and deleting. And we're going to double-click into Dr. J and change this so he's leaving a little early. Once again, make sure that your operatories are correct. Now that I have Dr. J listed out of Op6, you'll notice that that is an operatory that was listed earlier under C1. Now if I click OK, limit my operatories to C1, you'll notice it shows Dr. J and Drew on Saturday, but going back to our OpenDental clinic, no longer shows a schedule on Saturday. Those operatories really are important, especially when you're setting it up for clinics. Now let's go over how to take our hard work from doing this week, copy on our Sunday day by highlighting Sunday and copying the entire week out. You'll notice this puts the dates of the contents it's copying for that week. We're going to click on October 18th, and we want this to paste out for the entire year so that we don't have to copy and paste into each individual week. Clicking on Repeat will update the schedule for those providers for the next 52 weeks. It will let you know that one or more scheduled providers does not have a schedule for the date range copied to the clipboard contents. These providers will have their schedules removed wherever pasted. This is letting you know that this is replacing those providers. One or more holiday exists in the date range. These will not be replaced. To replace them, remove the holiday schedule from the destination date range and then repeat the process of copying. We now have a schedule out for the next 52 weeks, and our holidays were left in place. If you do need to remove a holiday, simply double-click into the date, highlight your holiday line item, and delete it off. If you need to add in a practice note, let's go into our C1 clinic as an example. If we need to add in a practice note, we can double-click into the date and add in a note. Choose your clinic to make sure that that note is showing on the correct clinic. we're going to put in that ODC is the clinic that's open today, just in case we want to take a look at the schedule and see what's going on. You'll notice that this lists as a note instead of a holiday. If we want to just be able to see the clinic-specific holidays and notes, once again unchecking that Show Practice Holidays and Notes box will just show the practice-specific holidays and notes, versus showing the practice holidays and notes, which is going to show you the headquarters. Now that we've created the schedules for our providers, you'll notice that in the background, our color has opened up to white to show that there is an available time slot for us to schedule our patient. Let's go ahead and close out of this window so that we can go ahead and show you a couple of examples with the appointments. You'll notice first off that all of the operatories that we've created today are showing in our view. This is because if we go to clinics at the top of the Open Dental program, you'll notice that it's chosen under headquarters. If we were to go to Open Dental Clinic, you'll notice that the operatories showing are the only ones assigned to that specific clinic. If we change this to go to C1, you'll notice that only Dr. J and Drew are available to be scheduled out of those operatories. Let's go ahead and go back to the Open Dental Clinic for a few examples since we have the perspective as well as a couple of different hygienists from here. We'll go ahead and start by going over the color indicator. Let's grab a patient inside of our system and double click into Dr. Alexa's Perspective Operatory to create an appointment for Johnny. We're going to choose our comp exam appointment type. If you're using appointment types in Open Dental, once again, the color may be overridden for that specific provider, but the provider will not be overridden on the appointment. This is scheduled out of Dr. Lex, out of that operatory, so it's assigned him as the provider in our Open Dental Clinic, and it's assigned him to that procedure based on the appointment type. We're going to click OK. You'll notice that Open Dental is trying to automatically set the status of our patient to Perspective. You can change the status yourself under the Family module and double-clicking into the patient's information to change the patient status in the left-hand side box here. But Open Dental will help you if your operatory is set to Perspective of setting that status automatically. To change the status of a patient, you can either create an appointment out of a non-Perspective operatory, or you could move that appointment into an operatory not marked as Perspective, say yes to moving the appointment, and Open Dental will ask if we want to change the status from Perspective to being an active patient, in which case you can say OK, and Open Dental will change that patient status for you. If we go back into the Family module, you'll notice here that the status is listed as patient instead of Perspective. Let's go ahead and create a new patient appointment as well. We'll select a different patient in our system. This time we're going to go ahead and schedule out of Dr. Abbott. And we're going to do our new patient cleaning. You'll notice listed here that Dr. Abbott is the only provider out of this operatory. We don't have a hygienist listed, and it wasn't marked as is hygiene in our operatory. This means that setting these procedures complete on this appointment, all of the production would go to Dr. Abbott. Let's see what happens when we move this over to an is hygiene operatory. We're going to double click into that appointment, and you'll notice that it now shows as Dr. Lex as the provider, Julia as my hygienist, and is hygiene is now checked. If I complete the appointment at this time and set it complete, we'll go into the account module so you can see. The comprehensive was assigned to Dr. Lex for production, where our bite wings, prophy, and our fluoride were assigned to Julia for production. This is because under lists and procedure codes, inside of those specific procedure codes, if we go in, they are marked as is hygiene procedures. Keep in mind that if this same appointment was completed in Dr. Abbott's operatory, where there was no hygienist and the Is Hygiene box was not checked, these would have actually been production for Dr. Abbott instead. Now let's go over creating an appointment for that procedure that we edited earlier today to show that no matter who is doing the appointment, Dr. J is going to be the one who gets the production for it. We're going to schedule an appointment out of Dr. Abbott's operatory. But Dr. J commonly comes over from our C1 clinic to do that specific procedure, regardless out of which operatory it's scheduled for. We're going to attach that procedure to the appointment today, and even though Dr. Abbott is the one who's doing the appointment, that specific procedure, when it's set complete, because we have a procedure level override, it will go ahead and default to Dr. J. If we right-click the appointment, go into the patient's account, right-click and set complete, go to the patient's account, you'll notice that it shows as the provider J instead of Dr. Abbott, as Dr. J is the provider override on that procedure. Now let's go ahead and show how quick and easy it is to schedule a patient's next cleaning. We've set this appointment complete for Julia. Because we have a schedule for Julia set up at least 6 months in the future, clicking on the Make Recall button at the top of our program, Open Dental will automatically move our calendar forward to when our patient's recall due date is. You can find the patient's recall due date listed below our appointment available time slots. In this case, April 8th is going to be when the insurance told us is going to be their next interval. You can also find that under the Family module, the top right-hand corner in the recall section. To be able to edit a patient's recall interval, in case the next time they're coming in should be for a perio appointment, simply double-click into the recall section and set perio, or double-click into the prophy date and change the interval from here. This would then update when you're clicking on the Make Recall button to move the calendar only as far forward as the recall interval is set for. In our case, it's 6 months and a week, and we have April 8th showing as the first available time slot for that due date, and April 9th as the very next day, just to make sure we have a buffer for the insurance to make sure that they cover this procedures. Selecting our date, clicking and dragging our appointment onto the schedule, and telling Open Dental that yes, we're going to be changing it. This will not be out of Dr. Lexa's operatory, but out of the hygienist operatory. And no, we don't want to change the length of time. You'll notice because I did not create this appointment using the appointment type this time, I used the Make Recall button, that it's defaulting to my primary, and in this case, Julia's color of the bright pink. If you have additional questions about setting up operatories, clinics, schedules, or what's happening inside of your specific system, please give us a call at 503-363-5432.